Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to have Patricia Hatherly here today with me on our Sunday live talk, and I hope you will really enjoy it. To have such an extraordinary woman here live, whom you can ask, whom you can ask all the questions around lactation and all the lac remedies that we have proved already. And Patricia, I'm so happy that you give us the opportunity to talk about the syndromes around lactation and the syndromes around the injection of babies in early childhood.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I wasn't thinking of maternum being a remedy for the time that we're living in now, particularly, although in the proving, I guess there were a couple of things that came up that perhaps linked it to a remedy that we might use in this situation. And one was that there was a dream of a cow, and the other was that there was a dream about a vampire. And vampire has been a key word in a lot of cases that I've had. And of course, when you have studied Latin and you know that the Latin word for cow is vacca,
Yes.
And the early inoculations were done in bovine broths. That's where our word vaccination comes from. It comes from derivatives of the cow. Although that's not so much done now because of mad cow disease. They stopped doing bovine broths a few years ago, but there is still that connection, which in my mind made me think perhaps this might be a remedy that we could use. But of course, then the vampire thing, which is about, the sharp fang and the poisoned blood, and the word poison did come up in the proving. Someone thought he was poisoned. And it's kind of a living and partly living, dead and undead kind of connection when you think of vampire. And the living and partly living comes from a quote by T.S. Eliot, murder in the cathedral. And the body is the cathedral, it's the temple. Tina Smith's, said that the connection was with the house, it's a remedy for incarnation, but it's more than that, I think. So that was the first thing that triggered it. But then the next thing that triggered it was early on this year, I was watching an interview with a CNN presenter talking to a doctor after the rollout and talking about reactions people were getting, and they were listing them all, the clots and the whatever. And then just at the end of it, the presenter said this odd thing. She said, and people are having dreams about aliens and spaceships. Oh my goodness, because that was a key for lac maternum. And that was the first thing that I thought, right, this might be a remedy that we can use now to bring people back into their bodies, because people were reporting having feeling left to their body, and people were observing that. And that's where it began. Me thinking about it was a remedy for now.
Yes, this great disorientation that is taking place nowadays, whether people have the injection or don't have the injection. But the big disorientation we have in the proving as well.
Yes, it's very unknown territory.
Yeah. And as I did tell you earlier, when I did read through the provings, I really realized that many, at least 50% of the symptoms I know from people who are on the spectrum, who are not normal neurotype, be it the autism spectrum, be it the ADD spectrum. I myself have a cat who is ADD, and so many of the symptoms apply to him.
Well, see, that's all about the oxytocin component that's in these remedies, lac maternum and lac humanum. And oxytocin is the remedy for socializing and for connecting and for establishing homeostasis. And there is a window of opportunity in the primal period, that's up to weaning, 4 years, for the receptors to be primed. And if the baby is not exposed to large amounts of oxytocin, that's not going to happen. And so that's why, it's underpinning the spectrum. We've now got conception in a petri dish. We've got elective cesarean. or a birth that's managed with artificial oxytocin, and then, working mothers and all the rest of it, very limited breastfeeding. So babies are in a very vulnerable situation now where the opportunity to have receptors primed optimally is denied them. And it's a big issue. And this is what's underpinning the spectrum disorder, among other things. But, it's the start of it.
Yes, and this all the bowel symptoms, all the symptoms that are due to the, yes, how do I say, deficient gut flora.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so interesting to me because I see my own symptoms, but I equally see the symptoms on the of the cat. So this not managed microbiome.
Mm.
This
Well,
is
the
so
thing is that
interesting to me.
colostrum is very laxative, and it really kicks off the formation of the lactobacillus, which is, of
Yeah,
course, the primary bacteria for a baby's gut. And that's a very important thing that happens in those early days. And it's colostrum, which is the signature of lac maternum. Um,
yeah,
can't
but
go past.
I just did not realize. I didn't know the proving. I did know your article, but it was in my head. It was not in my heart till I did read through it last week, and really it did combine in my head.
Mm, mm. It's a very special substance, colostrum. And I think it's interesting, and maybe it's important that when Tinnis put it together, so it was milk gathered from 9 women from day 3 to 9 months. So you've got colostrum and perhaps involuting milk. Involuting milk's very like colostrum. And this was gathered in the early 90s, 1996. So those women would have been born in the 60s and 70s. So they would have had all the childhood diseases, which women are not getting now. And this is an important part of this because in colostrum, there are the IgE and IgG and all those immunoglobulins that are linked to the lifelong immunity that you get from having had mumps and measles and chickenpox and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important for it to be in their placenta and then in the colostrum so that the baby gets the protection until it starts to make its own immunoglobulins. And we've got to a position now in evolution and civilization where that's not happening with women. They're not getting exposure. They're not getting their antibodies topped up from nursing their children, getting these childhood diseases. And so if you were to gather the colostrum today, it wouldn't be the same as it is in the
Yeah.
remedy that Tinnis collected. This is a really important point. We haven't looked at it. There's been no research done on this, but it worries me that babies are vulnerable, maybe are going to need lac maternum the minute they're born to make up for this deficit. And I know they've tried giving women now vaccines in the pregnancy, and they've even tried giving them in the week postpartum, and that was a disaster because it really affected the babies. But it's become a real issue.
Definitely, definitely. And it's this artificial immunoglobulin is not the same as the
No.
one that you produce when you have the illness.
Yeah.
It's a virtual reality,
Yes.
and it's, for me it looks like depletion, be it in the soil, be it in the seeds, be it in the colostrum. We are going to a situation of scarcity where things are just not as they were 50 years ago,
Yeah. Yeah, I
not
agree.
that rich.
Yeah. Yes, we need to get back to basics. I think I think we've got a second generation now of women reproducing who haven't had that exposure that people my age did. Now I'm a baby boomer, and we had all of those diseases when we were young, so our babies got protected. But we've got lac maternum, so that's good. It can step in and do the job.
Yes, so from what would you like to tell people about this remedy? What do you think that everybody should have in mind?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the story of it was, I was into lacumanum, I discovered that, and I thought it was a wonderful remedy. And then Tinnis wrote this article in Links in 1999 where he said that he had this combination remedy. And and that he thought it was going to be much better than lac-m because it was more universal. That's what he said. And I went, I don't know, it's going to have colostrum in it, maybe involuting milk. And I did ask him, was that woman, 8 and 9 month women, were they in the process of weaning? And he didn't know, which I thought was really bad from a research protocol point of view. But I did ask him, could I do the proving? And he said yes. And I met him in Nepal, actually. I was out trekking and he was there doing a seminar, which I went to, and he gave me LM6 and MK. And I just had 4 provers, 3 men and 1 woman when I came back. And it was very different. I was expecting it to be different. But that was a psychological profile that really astounded me. And when I went to the provers meeting at the end of the proving, and I just sat in the back of the room when all the supervisors produced the notes, I got really excited because I could see straight away that there was this connection with birth. For instance, there was the report of the headaches with the feeling of pressure on the vertex and the feeling of pressure around here, and a headache that was worse for bending forward, but better for bending the head back and straightening out the body. So these are all the processes that go through as the baby comes down the birth canal and gets born, which is quite amazing. And then there was this connection with the bleeding. 2 of the provers got spontaneous bleeds that just would not clot. And that's the other connection to what's coming now. There seems to be this connection with the inoculation that people are having for COVID, with clotting and hemorrhage. And, there is a direct connection with lac maternum. I mean, this whole thing about babies are deficient in vitamin K. And so therefore, they have to have the shot, which is not true because colostrum is extremely rich in vitamin K. And of course, by the end of the first week, it's the E. coli, which is in breast milk, which seeds the microbiome, and then they start to manufacture their own vitamin K. So it's not an issue. It was only an issue when mothers and babies got separated and babies got put in nurseries and there were timed feeds and babies got little colostrum that you got hemorrhagic disease. It should never have happened, and babies should not routinely be given that. But there is this lovely connection between birth and this whole newborn period. And in the proving, there were all these rubrics about disassociation from the body, having left the body, hovering over the body. And the other one is about the vertigo. So, when a bullet reaches its target, it's spinning. Now, when a baby comes down in the pelvis, it spins to come out. It's the same with the dolphin, who's very similar to us. And the dolphin will actually spin to give birth. And I've seen elephants do it too. They spin to give birth with that rotation, which has got something to do with the vital force coming in to connect. I think there is something to do with that. And one of the provers got such extreme vertigo that he was literally bouncing off the walls of the hallway in the middle of the night, such that his partner she gave him cocculus. I was very upset about that. But anyway, it didn't seem to interfere. But all the cases have vertigo, extreme vertigo, which is what people are getting now. And there is this whole thing about lassitude, lacking energy. Like when a baby's born, it will have a feed. It's got a very strong sense of smell, which also came out in the proving. Like a baby in 48 hours can detect its own mother's milk over that of another. They've done research on that using nursing pads, which is fascinating. So you've got your heightened senses, which is one of the themes. And then this filling up with the colostrum and then wanting to sleep and just cut off from life. Appetite goes right down. These are all the things that people are reporting from being around people who've had the shot. I don't know that we can do much for people who have had it, but certainly I'm using it with people who have been around people who have, and they've got all of these kinds of symptoms, and it's doing them a lot of good. They just kind of come back in, their appetite comes up, the nausea and the vomiting settles. So they're the important things, I think, connected with the proving and the situation that we're dealing with now. They were big keynotes in the proving, and they're key markers, if you like, about what's happening with people.
Yes, the inoculation that they do nowadays with the mRNA is different to what we did in vaccination before. So it's not astounding that we have new symptoms as a reaction to that inoculation.
Well, it's not really a vaccine in the true sense, in that usually there's a bacterium or a virus that is isolated, and then you package it up and you get this immunological reaction. Um, I mean, I have read that there was some Russian research apparently that says the spike protein is a bacterium, and that their inoculation has isolated that, and they're using that. It's very different. It's not an mRNA inoculation. It's a more a traditional one. I don't know how efficacious it is, but that's interesting to me, because ivermectin has been touted as being efficacious if you give it early, and it's an antibacterial. So, there is that connection there, which is a little bit odd. But we don't really know. We don't have all the information to know what we're being given.
Yeah. The one thing that I can tell from meeting people here in Greece who are vaccinated is that they are quite disorientated.
Yeah.
They don't have the mental capacity they had before.
Yeah.
The craftsmen are doing many, many mistakes.
Yes.
They are
Disorientation.
a bit ADD. They hurry all the time,
Yeah.
but cannot really focus on the work.
Yes.
And this is very different to what it was the years before.
That's right. And they're all symptoms that came out in the proving: lack of sense of direction, inability for mental function, that they're in lac maternum and in lac humanum. Absolutely. But particularly in lac maternum, a feeling of not being in your body. Tina said that when he made the remedy, the first thing he did, he gave it to a sensitive, and she had a dream of a house. And he said that's how he knew it was a remedy for incarnation. And houses is one of the key things that will come up in dreams of people who need this remedy. So it is, and psychics at the moment are saying when they observe people who've been recently inoculated, it's almost like their vital forces left them and their aura is quite dark and they're not feeling connected. And when you look at some of the delusions and dreams in the proving, they are revolting. You're talking about skinless cadavers and skin coming off and dissection and the body cut in half and being one step behind or two steps in front, looking in the mirror and seeing an older or a younger version of the self. It's not a being a here in the now. And this is what people are reporting, is that they're kind of knocked sideways. They're not here in the now.
Yes,
Pulled into another dimension. That was one of the other things that came out in the proving, was a very interesting phrase. And another one was having a motto put on the forehead. And the prover couldn't remember. They said it was Latin. But, when you think about it, we're talking about vaccine passports and, being traced and tracked. And this is what this is all about, which is another interesting connection to my mind.
yes, I can tell you that in Cyprus, people are already thinking of non-vaccinated people having to be marked.
Oh, we've been in lockdown here, and we're supposed to all wear masks, and people my age are not allowed to leave home for the next 2 weeks, apparently. So it's crazy what's going on.
It's very, very interesting what's happening on the political and the legal side.
Well, the Nuremberg Code says that we're not allowed to experiment on anyone and we have to have informed consent. And the bottom line about the situation at the moment is that it's a clinical trial that doesn't finish till 2023. So, until all the data is amassed and there's been a report done, we can't give really proper informed consent to people. So I'm saying to people, just opt for being in the control group. It's just a better place to go to.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. If you have the possibility, then be a bit reluctant and give other people the possibility to be vaccinated upfront to you.
Well, if people want to have it, that's fine. It's a free will universe, and some people are scared and they want to have it. That's what they're used to, and if the opportunity's there, and if they want to do that, that's fine. But then if you don't, you shouldn't be vilified, because 99.9% of people who get COVID get over it. And if you get antibodies, the research is coming out now saying that they are long-lasting. Do you know about the big project that's going on in the Netherlands at the moment? They got
No.
a group of women at the end of last year. They got ethics approval for it. 7,500 women who have had COVID and are breastfeeding are donating their milk, and they're making ice cream out of it. They've either got pear flavored or apple flavored, and they're giving it to the elderly in the care homes to supplement and to keep them protected. How about that? So I just think that's amazing. And I mean, there have been lots of reports of babies who've done well, have been positive, and because they're breastfed, they've become negative very quickly, because the breast has the ability for any virus to actually produce antibodies. I mean, there was a lot of kerfuffle about AIDS when it first reared its head, but now we know that, you know, to be breastfed during AIDS is protective, and there's quite a few things in breast milk which are protective against AIDS, and it's going to be the same with COVID.
Yes. So why do you think is it that breastfeeding feeding got so unmodern?
Unmodern.
Yeah, that people are just not willing to do it anymore.
Well, there's a couple of things. I think clever marketing, you know, that people think that if you um, have formula, it's just as good and it's safe and it's well made. There's all of that. But then there's the whole push for women to be in the workforce and to want to be in the workforce, and a stigma around that if you're a homemaker, it's not a proper job. Yeah, which is really sad. I mean, for 500 calories a day, women will produce litres of breast milk, which on the open market are worth thousands and thousands of dollars. And there are serious papers written about what breast milk manufacture contributes to the GDP of a nation. It's huge. It's huge. It's the most sustainable carbon neutral activity on the planet.
Yeah.
You know, we need to be pushing this a little bit more, you know, when we're being very concerned about sustainability. I mean, to produce formula, you've got to have dairy and herds and manufacture of tins and bottles, and you've got to have electricity, and you've got to have clean water, and it goes on and on and on. Whereas to be breastfed is a snip. But women don't get a lot of the proper support. But I tell you what, in the last 30 or 40 years, the amount of research that's gone into breastfeeding is huge, huge, probably more than in any other area. I mean, what we know now about human milk is amazing.
So would you like to explain the difference between human milk and, let's say, cow milk to the people? Because a
Well,
lot
one of the
of them might
basic
not know it.
differences is that the main protein in human milk is alpha lactalbumin, and in cow's milk it's beta lactoglobulin. They have a casein whey ratio of 80 to 20, so it's 80% casein. That's why it's very opaque and white. Human milk is only 40% casein. That's why it's thin and blue. So the predominance of our milk is the whey protein. And in colostrum, the whey protein constitutes 90% of the solution, but in a full lactation, it's 60%. I've got a poster down in my clinic that's got 2 columns on it. Have you ever wondered what's in formula and breast milk? And so in the formula, it's got about 20 things, like what you can read on the side. The rest of it's 2 meters long. And that's just what we know from common research now. I mean, the depth that they've gone into now is just absolutely amazing. I mean, there's a whole class of special sugars in human milk called oligosaccharides. There's over 100 of them. They're not in any other milk, and their job is just to feed the microbiome, keep the
Look
gut
at that.
healthy, establish a really good microbiota. You don't get that in any other milk. It's antiviral. Every time a baby gets sick, it will inoculate the mother through its saliva into the breast, and immediately the mother will make antibodies to whatever, you know, is going on with that child. Could have picked up a cold or something if it had been in daycare, and the baby will get over it quite quickly, usually without needing anything. So you don't get that kind of dynamic situation with cow's milk. Maybe calves have that relationship with their mother. You could comment on that, I don't know, but certainly cow's milk is no value to humans other than that it is a protein and it's got some vitamins and minerals and calcium and phosphorus. But the calcium and phosphorus ratio is not the same as in human milk. It's way out of whack. It's too high and there's too much phosphorus in it. So the fact of the matter is, in cow's milk, most of the calcium is bound up and excreted in the bowel, whereas in human milk, all the calcium's bioavailable.
Yes, this is it. What is astounding to me as a vet, that human doctors think that the calcium in cow milk is available for humans.
No, it's not.
Which
It's not
is not
bioavailable.
true. Which is not
No,
true.
no, it's not. And the thing is, and when you're weaning, the calcium will go back to the bones. I mean, there's a lot of research on this that, to breastfeed is protective against osteoporosis, and women will have stronger bones at the end of them if they've had a good diet. It's not depleting in any way unless they're having deficient diets. But the body will always provide for the baby. I mean, women in refugee camps will produce milk that's identical to women in a civilized town because that's what the body does. It's all about providing for the next generation. And we know that because WHO did a huge study back in the 80s. It went for 10 years when they went all around the world, looked at all the different cultures and every situation and produced really comprehensive profiles about human milk to find that there's a lot of consistency. And interestingly, the animal milk that's closest to ours is lac-m. It's the milk of the donkey.
Mm-hmm.
It's got similar protein levels and it's got relatively higher lactose levels. The dolphin has high lactose levels, the primates have high lactose, and that's all about brain development. I mean, that's, cow's milk's got very low lactose. They're dumb animals, whereas human milk has a lot of high lactose because it's important for the brain. Mm-hmm. That's another big difference that people need to kind of get their head around. Makes you smarter.
Yeah, it's such an interesting topic, which you usually don't think about.
No, they did a very long-term study in Brazil that went for about 30 years. They published the results about a decade or so ago, where they followed thousands of babies who were breastfed or not breastfed. And in their 30s, they reevaluated them. And in every instance, those who'd been breastfed were doing better. They were healthier, they were more intelligent, they had better jobs, they had higher income, life was a lot better. So that's the kind of modulating effect that human milk or access to human milk will have. It's, people, it's definitely, you have less chance of diabetes when you're older, less chance of heart disease. For women, less chance of breast cancer. You go tick, 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 tick. So it's not a trivial thing to be not breastfed. And I think people have just not put their head around it.
Yes, it is. I only can say that it's so astounding to me. And when you talk about the intelligence, I still want to go back to the people on the spectrum and how this not breastfeeding affects the receptors. And please, could you talk a bit more about that?
This is just an emerging area of research that I first came across from the work of Michel Odont. I don't know whether you know about him, but he has an institute, the Primal Health Research Institute. Amazing amount of work. And he's researched oxytocin very extensively, and this is what he's coming out with. And I agree with him because I see it in clinic. I think you had a look at that autism case of mine that I had in Milk Matters. I mean, it was interesting how lac-maternum and lac-humanum were used as part of, getting her better, because it was a matter of trying to go back and, she had a traumatic birth to fix all that, in the return order in which things occurred. And that's the big etiology for lac-maternum is birth trauma. Mm-hmm. The not wanting to come into the body and settle into the body because of trauma around birth is one of the main etiologies. And in those early days before the milk comes in day 3, the junctions between the milk cells are open. And so what's in the bloodstream can get into the breast. And so any of the drugs that the mother had in the labour all get dumped on the baby. And so there's an imprinting of drugs. And there was research done in the 70s, and then a decade later they looked at it again, and they found incidences of self-harm in children who had had traumatic births. And then they looked at it again 10 years later, and suicide was linked to it. And that's for me, the essence of lac-maternum. It is to be or not to be. There's big suicidal ideation. There is a death wish. It's about, I don't want to be in planet Earth. I don't want this experience. I don't want to come into this body and identify with being a male or a female in this lifetime and just get on with it. There's resistance to all of that. And that's linked a lot to the trauma that is around birth. And let's face it, physiologic birth now is not common.
Yes.
Which
People
is a shame.
are going for cesarean.
Yeah, well, even medicalized, you're having inductions and artificial oxytocin, and, whereas 30 years ago, there was a big wave of women being more empowered around birth. And I know I used to be a childbirth educator, and we used to not have enough educators to run the classes, where people were just hungry for information and to be able to have good births. And doctors would refer the couples to come to our classes, but then they woke up thinking, if we put the classes on in the hospital, we'll have more control of the situation. And overnight it just changed. Nobody came to classes in the community anymore, and it was all done through hospitals. And couples just went in and were told what the hospital experience would be, and so be it. It's about moving them through.
Yes, it's wisdom replaced by knowledge, and that doesn't work.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame.
And all the traditional women knowledge, it's vanishing.
Yeah, it's almost, well, it hasn't vanished, but it's diminishing. There are still some people there, holding the line, if you like. And do you know of Ina May Gaskin? She's still around and doing the work in Kentucky with the women. And here we've got Sarah Buckley is doing a lot of really good work. There's still some people doing some fantastic work to kind of promote this idea that what happens at this time is important. But I think women have become scared. They're not embracing it the way women of my generation did. It was an excitement. I mean, I've got 6 grandchildren, and they're nearly all cesarean. There's only one of them that's not. It's just, but that's pretty typical of what's going on now. And they all had different reasons.
Yes, but I think it's because people are educated to be fearful. They're educated to be anxious. They're educated to worry about things. They are not educated to be courageous.
No, to be connected, to walk the walk, to be connected with Mother Nature and the rhythms of Mother Nature. I know with our Aboriginal people, there'd be places where women would go to birth that, you'd be at the edge of forests or in streams where you'd have the cadence of nature, and, you could connect with the Schumann resonance of the land, and it would almost be like an attraction, if you like, for the body. None of that happens anymore. You go into hospitals and it's scary and smelly and fear-inducing, and it's always a focus on what could go wrong, which is a shame, instead of focusing on all the good and positive things. But I don't know. I think it will swing around again. Things do.
Yeah. If you think of the newborn with the heightened senses of smell, hearing,
Yeah.
and yes, probably heart coherence. Being born in an surgery situation.
Yeah.
with all this immense light, all the noise,
Yeah.
all the people. From the newborn's perspective, that's disgusting. And the first thing you get is somebody who beats you or just puts a needle in you and coming to the earth on the planet this way.
Yeah.
It really is frightening.
It is scary. I mean, in a normal physiologic birth, the baby gets exposed to bacteria as it comes down the birth canal and then gets put on the mother's stomach and then gets all the bacteria that's on her skin. And that's really important for getting in the nose and the mouth. And those creeping, crawling reflexes that newborns have enable the baby to go and search for the nipple. And if it's a normal physiologic birth, a baby will, within that hour, find its way to the nipple. And I think that that's an important first lesson. Um, if I struggle, I will survive, and Sora then is kind of cemented in the ascendant, I can walk the walk, I can do this. But the baby, to search for that nipple and to be connected to the mother is like reconnecting again what it had in the womb. And then all is well, it's in the nest. But, as you say, when it's a medicalized birth, that's not happening. And that's one of the big etiologies for lac-maternum. It's this, why would I want to come into this body and reside in this body when all this stuff is happening? It's just not nice, especially if there were a lot of drugs used. It's a very toxic.
Toxic
And that was one of
environment.
the other things that came out in the proving, a desire for Coca-Cola and coffee and drugs, marijuana, all of that sort of thing. The other interesting thing too was a desire for protein foods, which of course that's what colostrum is. It's a bolus of protein. That was one of the other really interesting connections between what was in the proving and what's in the normal situation around what's in colostrum. Whereas in lac-humanum, the craving is for sweet milks, comfort food, vanilla, custard,
Yeah.
caramel.
Yeah. So interesting. I never stepped into the footprints of a newborn and took myself into the situation, how it might feel. But if you think of it, it's a tormenting situation. It's very exhausted being born. It's
Mm.
painful
Oh, yeah.
and
Scary.
scary. You don't know what's coming. Then you need to breathe somehow, get your oxygen. And before you are depleted, you have to find the nipple.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because just going back to that case that's in my Milk Matters on the autism and the use of stramonium, that fear of coming down a tunnel, which is often associated with birth trauma. But with that little girl too, there was that incidence about being scared of doorways. And I mean, the cervix is a portal. When you think about it, you have to come down through this portal into what? If you can imagine from the baby's point of view, it's only 3 inches, but there is just death there at that portal, and in our repertories we've got fear of doorways as lac canina, but we really should add lac maternum into that, I think.
I think so. I
Yeah,
think.
we go through a portal at the beginning of life and at the end of life, and that's when the syphilitic miasm is most predominant, whereas death is beckoning. There is this, I mean, the reality of a true death is at the end of life, but even at the beginning of life there is this sense, well, you're dead to one state and then going to another, but you don't know what that is.
Yeah, depending on the culture and depending on the religion, it's different. We can view life as life without body and life within body. So it's always a doorway at the end.
Mm,
At
yes,
the end
I
of
agree.
having no body, it's being born, and at the end of having a body, it's leaving the body.
Yes,
And if I think of my near death experiences, it's the same thing. You
yes,
just see the body from outside, you're disorientated. It's a heightened sense of perception. You can
yes,
see more, you can hear more, you can
yeah,
smell more. And for this extracorporeal experience, it's It's such a relaxing, good experience to be without pain.
Yeah, it's a blissful kind of state. And certainly in lac-m maternum cases, you have this thing of leaving the body. And in meditative state or dream state, it's very consistent. Um,
And I think that for those who are on the spectrum, especially autism spectrum like me, this leaving the body from time to time and be in this blissful, non painful state, it's just that thing.
mm,
If you're clever, you call it meditation.
yeah, yeah. But really, the reality should have been that you went to the breast and you had the sense of the nest and that you developed so that by the age of 4, you were happy to leave the nest and go out into the world. And of course, if that doesn't happen, it creates this longing for that connection again, which you can do from leaving the body. But if you're going to have a planet Earth experience, that's not what the recipe is, if you like.
No, and from my personal experience, I can tell that it is a lot about heart coherence. It's
Mm.
just a heart field where the probably the mother's and the little child's heart are beating in quite the same rhythm, being totally coherent to each other.
And you hold the baby across your heart when you breastfeed it. It's
Definitely.
it's held
So,
in the heart chakra. Whereas with animals, they have the ventral line or they have dugs down near the pelvis, where we have them up here across the heart chakra. It's quite unique.
it's quite unique. But as a vet, I can tell you when you have a baby from another species who is thrown away by the mother and you want it to survive, put it on the heart because
Yeah.
it instantly connects to the heart. It goes into the heart coherence, and this is the only thing that gives him, gives it the instinct to survive
Actually, it's
or the will
interesting
to
because on
survive.
my timeline in Facebook, if you go down, there is a little piece, it's a little video of a baby whose mother died in childbirth,
Mhm.
and the mother's heart was given to a man. And the baby's very fretful, and you see the images of all the people and carers trying to settle the baby, and it's not happy. But that man comes in and takes the baby and holds the baby, and the baby immediately recognizes that it's its mother's heart. It's amazing,
Yeah, yeah.
amazing.
This is the
Recognized it in
thing
another
about
person.
Yeah, this is the thing about heart surgery that when you transplant a heart, you transplant a memory
Yeah,
and you
yeah,
transplant something that there are not words for it. You
yeah,
transplant an entity somehow.
yeah, yeah.
And the person who gets a new heart isn't the same person as
No,
before.
that's true. Yeah, there's a lot of
It,
stuff about that.
yeah.
Mm, mm.
So everybody who goes for heart transplantation needs to know that. And as far as I know, they are not told.
Yeah, it's difficult. Oh, dear. It's hard being a human.
Yes, yes,
Uh,
yes. And what I wanted to point out before, in the spectrum, we have the possibility to easier leave the body. And it's always around painful situations or shocking situations
yeah,
that you just
yeah,
go away.
yeah. Well, see, that's the thing about human milk. Human milk, when you analyze it, has all of the vitamins, all of the minerals that's in planet Earth. And so the actual having of that milk as the sustenance grounds you into the rhythms of Mother Earth so that you're happy to walk the walk and to face the adversaries that come your way as a human. Whereas if you don't get that, that's when you want to go because you don't feel really grounded and steady here. You haven't quite had the opportunity to embrace that. You're not cemented in. It's a problem. There is also one of the other things that's interesting about lac maternum is this thing of time travel. Um, I've had a few cases where, as a child who's hurting and sad, that the higher self, as an adult, came to the child to reassure. I've even had cases where an ascended master has come to reassure. I had this case too once where a little girl I'd been treating with lac-m, and then she needed lac-maternum, reverse order in which things occurred, because she had a very traumatic birth. She had to be given Narcan because her APGAR score was really low. And as I was treating her, she was telling me about a dream she'd had. She was about 8, this little girl. And she said, I fly in my dreams. And she said, I had this dream recently and I was flying and there was mummy and grandma and they were talking about, and she said this conversation and the mother was in the room and it was a conversation that had happened in her mother's childhood. And this child had accessed it through the Akashic record. That was just quite amazing. So there's this whole other world thing with lac-maternum, whereas you're not here and in the body, you can be out in the bardo. And that's another thing too that's interesting, getting back to the aliens and the being out in the spaceships, which is what began my connection with this, is that there are themes of circles in the lacs. So lac-humanum, it's the merry-go-round, and it's the same in lac delphinum, it's the merry-go-round, it will come up. But in lac-maternum, it's the Ferris wheel, because it brings you down from the height and brings you down to the ground. So that's the image, it's the Ferris wheel. Brings you in from the bardo.
So there's a real question to me. As being born and dying is not so different. Whether lac-maternum is one of the remedies we could use in working with dying persons.
Well, no, it's actually lac-humanum.
Oh,
because the thing, see, lac-maternum is about the coming in at birth and lac-humanum is about the leaving. See, aphorism number 9 says you have to have a healthy body in order for the spirit to reach its highest potential. And that's the story of lac-humanum and human milk. If babies have access to human milk till they're 4, which is when they're supposed to have it, all of the body systems are mature, they're optimal, then you can go out into the community, you can go to school, can form relationships, have a meaningful job, reach some wisdom and self-actualize, okay? Mm-hmm. And that's why lac-humanum dreams of being with important people and with royalty, because there's a good sense of the ego. And in Sankaran's prover number 13, had this amazing dream of walking up a flight of stairs to have 2 doors open and to be received by 2 gods. So it is the remedy that you give people just before they go, because it helps them to self-realize. I always give a 1M.
Okay.
Perfect.
That was another question I wanted to ask you. What potencies do you recommend in using lac-maternum, lac-humanum in different...
With lac-maternum, I pretty much just use 200C, and I give it 3 times a day for 3 days, and that's it, because it's 3 days that we have colostrum.
Okay.
And it is a remedy really you can only use once. Mm-hmm. Because colostrum is only available early on. You have the opportunity to get it once, that's it. And then you should move to lac-humanum after that. Okay. Lac-humanum, I use all potencies. It depends what's going on. Can use LMs, I can use the centesimals. Really depends what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And coming to the end, you go to the higher potencies.
Go to the higher potencies. With women who are breastfeeding and want to or have to wean early, say if a woman gets 12 months maternity leave and then has to go to work and she has to wean and she doesn't want to wean, I'm suggesting that she make a remedy from her milk up to 7C, and that's on my website, how to do that in Milk Matters. And so 7C is a potentiating potency, because lac-humanum is a sarcode. And so she has that then to give her baby. And I suggest that at the new moon and full moon, she just gives it. Or if the baby's sick, she can give her the lac-humanum 7C that she's made from her milk to help the baby get through that sickness. So she's got that there. And it's a little bit of an experiment that I'm doing with mothers and encouraging women to do that, so that we've got all this lac-humanum everywhere on the planet that we can use with our babies.
Mm-hmm. as a kind of substitute if the baby has not access to the mother's milk.
Not access to. Did you read my article that I had in H-pathy last year? It was about a child. There was twins and they were born very premature and so really didn't get very much colostrum, and the mother struggled to breastfeed them. They did okay, but one of the twins, when they moved to live on a property, started to get a lot of gut issues, and it was worms, and we tried all of the worm remedies and nothing was working. Then she had another baby and she had a home birth. It was going beautifully. And after about 4 or 5 months, I just thought, I think this baby's milk might be important. And the mother had some colostrum in the freezer, like she had some of the transitional milk. So we gave lac-maternum to the child. Then we thawed out that milk and gave it to her to drink. And that kind of sealed all that didn't happen when she was born, because the mother was in the ICU for 3 days and she didn't see them, and they were given donor milk. They didn't get colostrum. And then because a bowel nosode often goes well with the milks, and I use a lot of Morgan Pure, with that baby that she had then, it was a 5-month-old baby, we took some stool from that baby and we made a bowel nosode and gave it to the child. Fixed everything. Just fixed everything. It was amazing, really, just to have that nosode that was from that family. And there was a very strong connection between the baby and that older child. And so you can get a bit imaginative about what you do, but the bowel nosodes have a strong affinity for the lacs, particularly Morgan Pure, and Psychotic Co is another one that I will use a fair bit if psychosis is predominant.
Okay. Yes, the issue between lac maternum and the microbiome is so astounding. And in spectrum people, we know that the microbiome is not good.
No, that's right. You miss out. I mean, if a baby is given formula or something, in those first days, it completely establishes a different microbiome
Yeah, yeah.
from what is supposed to be. It's really important that nothing goes in the baby's mouth except that mother's colostrum, if possible. Because the other really interesting thing now is, this is emerging research. We know that there's this thing called microRNA that's in bodily fluids, and it's in milk. And it takes the epigenetic tags going back at least 60 years. So if you think of a baby being a bit like a hard drive that needs its software uploaded, it's its mother's milk that uploads the software that gives the story of that family, that child then has the agenda, the programming about what they need to go through. To have another mother's milk's okay, but it's not as ideal as having your own mother's milk.
It's so interesting because I have examples in my family. I was breastfed about a week, so I never had the feeling to belong to my family or the bigger family. I don't have connection to my cousins and so. My second sister was breastfed, and she has a very good connection to all of the family. My youngest sister didn't get any breast milk, and has only contact with her two daughters and her husband, no connection to the family, not even to my parents. So it's resonating. It's a lot resonating in myself.
It does. It does. I mean, I was breastfed by my aunt. My mother and father were living with his brother and his wife, and Margaret and my mother had babies 2 weeks apart. So my cousin Susan was 2 weeks younger than me. And my mother was very strict every 4 hours. And of course, her supply wasn't good. And I'd be crying, and Auntie Margaret would take pity on me and she'd give me her leftovers. And of course, then she made lots of milk. And I had a close connection with my cousin, and she died suddenly at the age of 51. And I came back from her funeral and I thought, oh my goodness, all the things that I'm going to do in life, I better get on and do them. And I sat down that day and started to write my first book on lactation, the Homeopathic Physician's Guide to Lactation. And it was the death of my cousin that kind of kick-started that. And cousin is a keynote word that's in lac-humanum. Usually when you take a case, the word cousin will come up.
So interesting.
Yeah, because the cousin represents the beginning of the group. It's the self
Yes.
versus the group. So you've got your unit as the family, but then you go out into the wider world and the cousin is the bridge.
It definitely is. When I look into my family and I look at just three sisters, I can tell it's true.
Mm.
I don't, I know the name of my cousins, but that's it. I don't have a relation to them.
Mm. Mm. It's a shame.
But if I look at my younger sister, I wonder if she even knows the names.
I think you need to go back and have some lac maternum and lac humanum, Maria.
Yeah,
When is your birthday? That would be a good time to do it.
yes, definitely. I have my 60th birthday upcoming.
Oh, very good. Big birthday.
Could be a good moment. As I always said, this is the half of my life.
Yeah, yeah.
Would be a good start for the second half.
Yes, it would be. I mean, when I discovered lac humanum, I took it in the LMs for a long time, and it did amazing work with me. I just, I even took a dose today. I just thought, oh, I think I might just take a dose of lac humanum before we talk tonight. So I just took a dose of 7C, because it's just
Oh,
such a lovely energy.
yeah. Yeah, I cannot tell yet because I didn't take it yet. But for those who want to redo the process, you would recommend to wait for a time of life where the symptoms are quite around and then take lac maternum for 3 days, 3 doses, C200 per day, and then leave the remedy forever. And maybe later continue with lac humanum whenever symptoms come up.
Yes, although, I mean, there have been cases which have come to me and they've been lac humanum, and I've worked with them with lac humanum, and we've gone in the reverse order in which things have occurred, and then lac maternum will come up, and then I give it after the lac humanum. So it really depends. But other times when people come, and it's usually when people have got a real death ideation, they're suicidal, they're taking drugs, that whole lac maternum picture, you would start with lac maternum and then get them back and then work with lac humanum. But with everything, you can't be routine. But see, lac humanum is a remedy I've used a lot with women in lactation, when they've had mastitis, because to get mastitis is anger towards not having been breastfed when you were a child.
Oh, I
It's
see.
an expression of anger, and it will come up often in a lactation, and you just give the lac humanum and get them through that, and then go back to their constitutional remedy.
Oh, this is astounding because when I think of cows, as a vet, I have a lot of connection to cows. They are not breastfed.
No,
And how often do they get mastitis nowadays?
yeah,
And
lots.
unmanageable with totally resistant bacteria.
I mean, they should put lactefloratum in the drinking water for those, calves.
Yeah, I'm just questioning whether any cow should have it one day sooner or later.
Don't know. We certainly, with all this interfering that we're doing, is got out of rhythm. And I mean, it just really is upsetting me now. There's all this talk about you can't say breastfeeding, you have to say chest feeding in case you upset people who, aren't able to breastfeed. And I just think, but it is a fact. We use the breast. We are called mammals because the Latin word for breast is mamma. And in taxonomy, that's why we were called mammals, because we produce milk for our young. There's no getting away from that. I'm not into cancel culture. That's what it is. We produce milk in our breasts, and so it is breastfeeding. And I just feel sad for people who perhaps feel sensitive about that, but I understand. But the fact of the matter is, it is breastfeeding.
Yes, I understand that for some it is pain not being breastfed, and that
Mm.
for them might prefer chest feeding, but you never can run away from pain. You have to go
No,
through
that's
it.
right.
You have to go
That's
through
right.
it to really get rid of it, so it doesn't help anyway.
I mean, I've supported women over the years who've had a lot of trouble with breastfeeding because they might have had augmentation of the breast or breast implants or have issues. Like if women go on the pill young now, they often don't develop enough tissue, milk cells to actually feed. So they have to use a nursing supplementer, which is either express breast milk or formula they put in a pouch, which they wear around their neck. And then there's a little pipette that will go next to the nipple. So the baby's able to feed and get some breast milk and the formula. But, they would still call that breastfeeding, even though there is that kind of interim thing. So I don't know. It's a sticky one. It is a sticky one, but it kind of intrigues me that in our repertories, Kent and those put mame in the chest section. When I
Mhm.
wrote my repertory, I didn't do that. I put it in its own section and called it breast. I just said no.
It's another time, another culture, and full of guilt all around sexuality.
Mm, yeah,
Yeah. What is a shame anyway?
yeah, it is a shame. But anyway, just sort of getting back to the topic of our talk. I mean, I'm just thinking that at the moment, with what's going on, if people could perhaps have a look at the proving, which is available from the link, and just make that connection with some of the symptoms that they're seeing in people who are affected by shedding, um, that it's doing some good work in actually just settling that down, which is good. Just kind of restarting them again.
Yes, you don't have to be afraid. It's not too complicated. It's 36
No.
pages. It's written in simple language and it's very orderly. You get all the text, the text of the provers. You have the repertory sections, you have the symptom sections, and you can easily read through it and make your own decision.
Mm.
Think it through and decide whether it applies to you or not.
Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah, yeah. Because at the end of the day, people have to make their own decisions about what goes into their body. Doesn't matter what it is.
Definitely. So
Yeah,
I would ask our participants here if they have any questions, please
sure.
write them in the chat now. So you have an expert here on the legs, and you have an expert here on leg maternum and leg humanum. And I hope that there are a lot of questions, and don't skip that chance. You have the expert here. So I hope we are getting a few questions, and my questions to you is concerning my little catty. I still call him baby Juno because he's a baby to me. He's 3 years old now. He has his bowel symptoms. His stool is sometimes soft, sometimes normal. He doesn't have really good appetite, and he is very, very, very nervous. As I said, he's ADD. I have to sit beside him and make sure when I put his bowl to him that he really eats. And if I'm not sitting next to him, he's just here and there as any ADD kid seeing the butterflies and runs off his food. He's very, very skinny. I would say he is a heart on 4 feet, a walking heart. Very sensitive little boy, very cute, very loving.
What
Uh,
was his birth like? Do you know?
I don't know. His mother threw him away when he was 1 week old. I then took him over. He had an umbilicitis that I could manage with calcium carbonicum.
Okay. Have you given any bowel nosodes to this?
No, I didn't. EM bacteria I did give.
I mean, I don't know much about the kind of microbiome that's in animals compared to humans, but do you
It's a
think
bit
that,
different. It's a bit different.
yeah, I could imagine. Um, I mean, if you have a litter of kittens that you have access to, and you could get the stool from the kitten, you could make a bowel nosode from a kitten
Mm-hmm.
and make up a remedy, say to 7C, and
Mm-hmm.
give it to this cat and see if that helps with the microbiome of the cat and to settle that down. Because anxiety is one of the big keynotes for Morgan Pure, which is the main bowel nosode we give with babies.
Yes, he's an anxious type.
Yeah.
As I didn't have any bowel nosode for cats, I did go to the effective microorganisms provided by Professor Teru Higa from Japan,
Okay. Yep.
which we have from, yes, for the plants actually.
Oh, okay. Did you give lacphalinum to the kitten?
Not yet. I was wondering whether I should
I
do that.
would. I would.
In
Absolutely.
C200?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, so I will do. We have
Hmm.
one question here in the chat. Manfred would like to know about a concrete case of lac maternum.
Oh, now that's an interesting kind of question, in that when you ask that as a homeopath and you're talking about somebody's constitutional remedy, you're talking about repeat prescriptions of the remedy as you progress. So with lac maternum, it's not like that. It's usually just a once off, for the presentation, which is around trauma. I mean, I can think of one case where it was a woman who was pregnant. She was a listen, and it was the headaches, the migraine headaches, that were ameliorated by bending the head back and straightening. And
Mhm.
she did very well on lac maternum. And then that was the only time I gave it, and it settled down. In this book, which is my first one, there's a chapter in the back, which is actually on my website, the chapter, where I discuss lac humanum, lac caninum, and lac maternum. And there's a really long case of lac maternum and that went over a long time. It was a woman, her name was Samantha, and she called herself Sam. And that's another thing. It's the identification with your full name is part of the lac humanum picture. And when people are approaching wellness, one of the questions I ask is, how do you sign your name? And usually people say it's the initial. So with me, it would be P. Hatherly.
Mhm.
But P is my name, but Hatherly is my tribe name. It's not my name. My name is Patricia.
Mhm.
So I sign my name now, Patricia Hatherly. And I encourage people to do that, when they're coming to a place of wellness, is to identify with who you are. Identify with who you are. But that's more a lac humanum thing. But with lac maternum, it usually is about aggravated from drugs, drugging, birth trauma, not wanting to be here. And it will turn them around. But you've just got that quick opportunity to do that and then move on. And if you don't and they slip back, you've lost them, which is really sad.
Okay. So I'm just wondering about a non-resolved case. It's now 50-year-old woman who can't really get onto her feet. She's always somehow in trouble and can't really contact. It's very nice woman, very social woman, but for her life she always says it's like walking in tar. And if she gets depressed, it's all dark, all dark. And for her, when she was a little baby, I think it was a few months, she got into hospital and got a very high dose of barbiturates and never went well from since then.
When people have got that kind of stuckness, I often think of silica.
I wouldn't see much silica in symptoms in
Okay.
there. I just
Mm.
thought whether this could be some kind of intoxication where we could think of lac maternum or somehow.
Well, certainly because of the barbiturates, the never well since the drugging, you could consider it. But just going back to the gentleman who asked the question before about the case, can I just refer him to the homepage of my website and to go down to Milk Matters and
Yes,
to read that case?
we posted
And
your website already in the chat.
okay, and there is a case there that's got lac maternum in it. That's a really good example of what it can do, and you can just go and access that and read it. And that's probably the easiest thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so are there any other questions from our listeners here to Patricia and about lac maternum, lac humanum? What is the specialty of lac delphinum?
Oh, it aids birthing women. That's its best one. There's a couple of articles on my website about that, and people can just go and have a look. It's in published articles. Um, they have this special affinity with pregnant women, dolphins, and there used to be a. You've heard of Igor Tchaikovsky? He was a male Russian midwife who used to take women down to the Black Sea to birth with the dolphins. And I know in the 70s there was a place in New Zealand where women could birth with dolphins. But I've given it to women a few times if they're feeling a little bit not supported with their caregivers or midwives just as they're about to give birth. And it works beautifully. It just relaxes them. They feel supported and they have beautiful births.
Okay,
I would
so
give it almost routinely for someone who's about to have a baby. I would give lactylphenum 200C just to settle the fears and the anxieties and to help have a really lovely birth.
interesting.
But there is an article about that on my website that I had published in England about it, and you can sort of see this. It's actually the dolphin and the human share a lot of chromosomes. There's only a tiny little bit where we're different. And when you look at the human embryo, just as the limbs are about to bud and it's still got the tail, it's identical with one from a dolphin. So at that stage of development, we're very similar. And there is a theory that, we talk about we evolved from primates, but there is another theory that says we evolved from wolves and the dolphin evolved from the wolf, and that we actually evolved down that line. I mean, that's why in the sea we've got the cetaceans who are mammals, that they actually evolved from the wolves, and we actually share a connection with them as well.
Did anybody prove wolf milk?
What was that?
Did anybody prove wolf milk yet?
Yes, absolutely. It was proved by Melissa Asselin and then again by Nancy Herrick. I've used lac-lupinum a lot. It's an amazing remedy. It's got themes of red and black. There's big association with fire. It's big energy to do with lack of energy or great endurance. Great suspicion, about being trapped. There's a lot of wariness, innate senses with the wolf. It's a lovely remedy, really lovely remedy.
Okay, so we have another question. I came up with the remedy when my son was vaccinated and I was terribly scared, and at night I still had the door ajar to hear him sleep and see if something was wrong with him. It reminded me of a time when he was a baby and I had to be with him all the time. I was constantly on the lookout, worried about the baby. It's a lac maternum symptom. Constantly worried about the baby.
Well, she could try that. It's for the protection. Yep, really worth a try. I mean, with vaccination, if mothers are doing the schedule with their children, This is something that came from Robin Murphy, and I've used it a lot over the years, is to give lac-m 30C the day before and the day of the inoculations. It just helps with the adjuvants, which are the toxic part of the inoculations that cause the trouble. It's not so much that you induce a bacterium or virus into the body, it's all the other things that are with it that can cause trouble. And the lac-m just deals with that and settles it, and it does help them get the best out of the shots and not so much have the aggravation. So that's something that I would give. And that was advice given by Robin Murphy like 30 years ago. I can remember, as a student, and I've used it a lot. Parents are very happy with it as a protocol.
Yes, an injection is an injection. It's like a needle or
Yeah,
a
that's
nail
right.
going into
It's a
your body
toxin.
and being toxic. There's a lot of the latent symptoms.
But, with a question like that lady just asked there, it's very hard to generalize in this kind of situation about, if she has access to a homeopath, it would be good for her to have that case taken properly, I think,
I
to see
think
what
she's
would really be
homeopath
best in that
herself.
situation.
I think she's homeopath herself.
Oh, okay. All right.
As we have
That's a different matter.
a lot of listeners today who I know to be homeopaths.
There probably would be, yes, yes.
Yeah. So, is there any other milk that you want to say a few words about?
Well, lac-caninum is another one that's interesting. You look at the trio of lac-caninum, lac-humanum, lac-maternum, there are a lot of similarities. I mean, the whole left-right thing, which you get in those three remedies, is actually linked to streptococcus. And that's why with lac-caninum, with that whole throat thing, left, right, that's to do with a strep infection.
Mm-hmm.
Mastitis that goes left, right, you can get streptococcus infection. So you got these connections. But then, of course, the left, right is also to do with our DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there is that connection as well. But there's a big essay about that on my website, connecting the three of them. And I did it in one of the Milk Matters too, where I actually did a graph where I actually compared the three of them. It's useful to sort of see where the differences are. I mean, lac-caninum is that they have a very poor sense of self because they've not been mothered. They've been abandoned. So often it's for people who've been adopted. With lac-maternum, it's birth trauma. But with lac-humanum, it's they weren't breastfed. So when you look at the food desires, lac-maternum, they have the desire for protein and for drugs. Lac-humanum, they want the sweet foods, the comfort foods. Lac-caninum, they're wanting tasty, piquant foods, mustard, pickles, that sort of thing. It's a big keynote. Yeah, there's a lot of depression in lac-caninum. As there's a saying, there's nothing lower than a dog's belly. There's a very poor sense of self because they give all their obeisance to the pack leader. They have no sense of self. Whereas with lac-humanum, it is about looking for the sense of self and having a healthy sense of self. So it's interesting to kind of look at them all and see where they're connected and where they're very different. Actually, on my website, there is a chart looking at all the different milks, and it's interesting to look at milks as a group and to see where the differences are with protein and fat and lactose. And when you look at the milks that came from like the seal and the whale and those, they're really high in fat. Why are they high in fat? Because, the babies get left on a rookery while the mother goes off to forage and feed herself, and she can be away for a couple of days before she comes back, and those babies have to get fat very quickly and they have to be sustained. Whereas ours is very high in water. In fact, the milk that's highest in water is the milk of the kangaroo. Well, go figure. I mean, when you look at the kangaroo and its habitat, it has to be extremely high in water. That's how it's evolved.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite fascinating to look at all the differences.
So tell me a bit more about kangaroo milk, as kangaroos are so familiar in your country, and
The
I
kangaroo milk.
never saw.
Well, it's very. There's also a proving of Uluru that was done by a German, and And then I did a proving, and this article is actually on my website, of the bottle tree. So there was the mineral, the animal, and the plant from this continent that are all very similar, and they all tell the story of the Aboriginals and of their connection with nature and about colonisation and how they were badly treated. So yeah, I had this lovely case of a woman who left the coast and she went to teach inland and in an Aboriginal settlement, and she was really badly treated. It's a very patriarchy, the males are the dominant, and what women have to offer is inconsiderate. And she was a singer, and she was trying to develop in the students in the school, she was a teacher, a sense of connecting to their culture through song, which is what they do. And she got a lot of resistance and unacceptance, and I gave her the milk of the kangaroo, and she got headhunted and got moved out of there into a more superior teaching position, which was kind of interesting how the universe intervened with that. She was able to had a lot more power to control what was happening with the curriculum in that part of Australia. So it was a really lovely story. But there's a sense of, the few times I've given it, it's been from people who have come from another culture to this country, and they've not settled, they've not become Australian. And I've given it to them, and it's kind of made them feel a bit Aussie because we're very multicultural here now. I mean, I'm 5th generation, so, I'm very Australian. But, there's a lot of people here who've just either come or their parents might have come.
Very interesting. So a specific milk from let's say, an animal associated with the country could help you to connect to a foreign country?
The word refugee has come up in a few of the provings. It's in lac-m, and it's also in lac-maternum, because in a way, refugee is that you're fleeing from one situation to come into another. But I mean, it's only been my experience with lac macropie, the kangaroo milk in Australia. There is that connection, although there is a connection I have found in cases with lac lupinum and America. And it's interesting because the milk of the wolf that was taken for the proving came from Yellowstone Park.
Oh.
So I think there is something to do with that.
I just was thinking about associating more to Greece, where I'm living, because the lifestyle coming from Germany or Austria to going to Greece, it's very different.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So when I think about so prominent Greek features, you would think about feta, cheese made of sheep milk.
Yeah.
So what are the specialities about sheep milk?
Ooh, I have written something about that. It's not in my lax book, but I have added it in, and it's in the programs, and I've not taken any cases of it. So there is a bit of a follow the leader kind of energy, a bit of a pack mentality with it. They're very docile. One remedy that I can talk a little bit more about is the milk of the donkey.
Yes,
because I've had some very interesting cases of that, because the profile of the milk of the donkey is very similar to human milk. And there's a lot in the lac-m proving that's very similar to lac-humanum proving. They have a good sense of themselves. And when you look at the periodic table, if you're going to look at Sholton's schema and you go down and you're looking in the gold series, lac-humanum sits at stage 10. I am the king, there's a good sense of self. Lac-acinum sits down at column 1. It's where barium is. So it's baryta carb. And so the energy of lac-acinum is very identical to baryta carb. Baryta carb has the back of the king. It's the court jester. It carries the king. The donkey carries the king. It's strong physically, and usually they're the people who have a lot of physique, a lot of brawn, but not so much brain. But they'd like to be the leader and they'd like to be the king, and there's some resentment about that, but they don't want the responsibility. So which is what can be Bharata Ka. So it's very, very interesting. And they have dreams or connection with lifts. Whereas, in lac-m, it's about being able to fly. Lac-maternum, you're out in the bardo. Lac-caninum, you're just coming off the ground. That lac-asinum, you're going up in a lift. So it's that whole idea of going to a height, which is, of course, what the donkey does. I mean, it carries the salt, and it's a pack animal. It's very sturdy. You would see a lot of it in the Greek islands and in the loads that they take. So there's a lot of that energy around it. But it's a really good remedy. But it's very linked to Bharata Ka.
I saw actually a lot of Bharata Ka here in Greek animals.
Yeah, I could believe that. Yeah. Strong, sturdy people. Yeah.
And I just wonder, I begin to wonder. We have another question here. Are there special remedies for being insured in the womb? Oh, I think this is a question about the mother not wanting the baby and the baby getting insecure.
More a placenta situation. Yeah.
It's the not being fed.
Yeah. The rejection starting early on.
Mm-hmm. So you would think of placenta as remedy?
I would think of more placenta in that situation, yes.
Okay, it's about the nourishing. I understand.
It's a tricky one. I mean, I know, a lot gets said about the energy of the mother and the thoughts of the mother and how it impacts on the baby. And sometimes it does, but then sometimes it doesn't. I find that, when a soul is incarnating, it has its own agenda. And, its situation has been created for its life's lessons. And it may not be in step with the mother. It might be complementary. Like a lot of sepia women will have a nat car baby. They're complementary remedies.
There's another question I could ask you. In my family, back then, it was the daughter of my great-great-grandfather. She died giving birth to a baby. And in my family, I have a person. She said, I cannot have a baby because when I will have a baby, I will die. So there seems to be passed down something through generations.
Yeah, could well be, for sure.
Is there any milk remedy?
Well, it's interesting because Tinner Smits, in his Inspiring Homeopathy, says that it's Rus tox, which is complementary to lac-maternum, and Rus tox deals with past life trauma. Yes. And so I would think more of Rus tox in that situation than lac-maternum. You need to go back and deal with the past life trauma.
Could work good. I will suggest it to that family member.
Yeah. But it depends what it is. I've been working with someone for a while, and there is a thread in her family of witches and being burnt and that sort of thing, and remedies, Helleborus is there in the family. Mm-hmm. So it just really depends what goes on in the family trees, and you need to go back and look at the situation.
Yes, and this is another thing which is declining, that people know about their families and have knowledge what happened in generations past.
Mm. And there's lots of ways you can deal with that, Marianne. It doesn't have to be through homeopathy. It can be through meditation and, doing energy
Definitely
work and just going back
consciousness
and
work.
snipping those bonds and resettling. And, I'm a Reiki master. You can go back and use Reiki to settle all that sort of stuff. So it doesn't have to be through remedies. But certainly, remedy could show itself in a person that is linked to that. But I often find it's Rostox.
Very interesting. So I just wonder whether we have another question, and if not, I would like you to do your final comment.
Well, we started when I suggested to you that we have this one-on-one. I said to you I'd like to call the session lac maternum and soul retrieval, and you changed it, which is fine. But I mean, for me, that's what lac maternum is about. It is about soul retrieval. It's about the vital force coming in for a new lifetime's experience. And if there is any kind of trauma in the passage of life that causes disassociation, it is lac maternum which can offer the promise of bringing them back and bringing them back on track. And at the moment, I'm observing with what's going on with all the fear and with the shedding that's going with these spike proteins that are in this mRNA device that's being inoculated into people, that this remedy is doing good work. And so I would recommend it for people to consider. So you've made the proving available so people can have a look at it and seeing if there's a good match with what they're observing in people and what's come from the proving.
And maybe observe in themselves if they get the shot.
Sure.
So
I don't know about whether when people get it, whether we can do anything. I really don't know the answer to that, and I wouldn't offer any hope that can be changed. But with shedding, I'm finding it's a little bit different. It's not. It's more an energetic kind of connection, if you like, rather than you've had work done on your DNA. I mean, I just saw a report, an autopsy report just last week that has come through of someone who's died after the vaccine and getting COVID, and it's in every organ of the body. So, it's very pervasive, and I don't really know whether we can alter that once it's done. I really don't know.
well, that's evolution. If you are flexible, you can adapt to whatever it is. So, in reality, this possibility of having shots or not is testing how flexible you are and how adaptable you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I just can hope for the most of people who get the shots that they are really adaptable to whatever toxin they are exposed to.
Yeah. What
And
will
that
be,
they
will be.
just can make it somehow, maybe with help, maybe with help of a remedy, maybe with help of another kind of treatment. But definitely, if somebody sees the symptoms of disconnection in him or herself, reach out.
Yeah, I think with confidence you could try it. Yeah, and it certainly wouldn't hurt to have it because it is a remedies which signature is very part of the human condition.
Definitely.
And the start to life.
Yeah.
Promise of renewal.
And it's about a big yes to being on this planet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a welcoming gift.
Could see it that way. Yes. Patricia, thank you very much for this talk today. Sorry
My
that I
pleasure.
mixed up the title. Actually, I didn't remember it.
That's okay. It is what it is. It is what it is. That's
And
fine. I
okay,
got to say it.
I really thought that we were combining it with the injection, because more and more we are hearing that we
Oh,
actually supposed to
I
go to
was,
the
but I just wasn't going to use that word in the title to put on Facebook and YouTube.
yeah, yeah,
That was all
yeah.
I was thinking of. But anyway, that's okay.
Okay. So hope to see you again soon,
Mhm. My
and wish
pleasure.
you have a very nice day today or evening. For you, it's the
And can I
evening
just say
already.
to the viewers, if anybody wants to get in touch with further questions, I'm quite happy to have them email me. You can contact me through my website. Mm-hmm.
Yes, this is why I said get in touch.
Yeah.
Yes. And we posted your website, and those who want to find you will definitely find you.
Yeah. And there's lots of articles on the lacs there, and in Milk Matters, there's also a lot too. So they're all archived. So people want to read them, they can.
And in the document for download that we gave in the proving, there's your total address in it.
Yeah. Now it's my old address actually.
Oh, that's bad.
It was a long time. It was another house.
Okay. So you
That's
have to
okay.
go to the website and find Patricia's address on the website.
Well, no, I don't have my address on the website either. I've just got my phone number, and my email is patricia@patriciahatherly.com. So I'm quite happy to have people email me. And if
Okay.
I need to give them my address, I will give them my address.
Yes. So get in contact if you feel so. And
Mm-hmm.
Patricia, thank you very much
My
and
pleasure.
have a nice Sunday.
Okay. Bye now.
Bye.